Welcome to Founders Unplugged, hosted by Greg McCallum. Long-form, honest conversations with founders and entrepreneurs from around the world.
Hey, I'm McEvily. I'm a product designer and entrepreneur, and I'm obsessed with listening to customers to make sure that I'm building the right thing because I've wasted millions of dollars in my career building the wrong thing. And I do that in a really specific way, and I'm hoping to chat a little bit about those nuances today with you, Greg.
That sounds good. You caught me off guard because that was a very quick introduction. But that's good. I like it. I think there was someone a couple of weeks back that did, I thought at the time, the shortest introduction so far, but I think you may have beat it. I'm going to have to time it.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's dive into it. I want to hear all about that and pick your brains on it. But I suppose before we do, do give us a little bit more. So how did your entrepreneurial journey start? Like, was there something that you'd always wanted to do, ever since sort of college or high school, or when did that sort of bug get you?
Yeah, I think the bug caught me early. I used to like to tinker and make things and sell stuff in my adolescent years through my teen years.
Oh, really?
But really, I think it took hold in when I was in university. I went to Cornell in this great design program. It's now called the College of Human-Centered Design. And I examined design from three different lenses, from the product lens, like through ergonomics and product design, through the interior design lens, and through the building design lens. And using that frame and understanding the psychology and how to apply psychology to design and its impacts on human behavior, I then applied to a slightly more nuanced field then called human-computer interaction, HCI, evolving into what is now called UX design, applying those things to the digital landscape. So I really have this understanding of design from all of the different ways of applying it. So in a small, nuanced way to a large urban planning way, and then even broader through internet products and affecting millions of users. So I realized that design was this really powerful tool in understanding how people think and work, and that if I could really understand them truly, I could build solutions that made people's lives better and that felt empowering and gave me a sense of purpose, however real or fake that might be. And that's guided me through into entrepreneurship, because I think there's a really big similarity between designers and entrepreneurs. Designers are looking for problems and how to solve them, just like entrepreneurs. Designers have enough of an ego to think that they can solve that problem, just like entrepreneurs. And so for the last decade or two, I've been blending those two things and helping other founders use the design lens to push their concepts and companies forward.
So what was your first sort of endeavor into blending these two things together?
I wrote my graduate thesis on rooftop integrated greenhouses.
Okay.
So I had this dream of greenhouses across an urban landscape, right, on the roofs of all of these apartment buildings and office buildings that could feed the people below, recapturing that arable land, so to speak, making it more efficient, reducing food miles. Was writing this thesis, spent basically a year on it, and got to the end and kind of had this realization that it was going to sit on a bookshelf in this library collecting dust and maybe might get referenced in the future. And I just felt so upset about how unuseful that sounded. And so I was like, how can I create this? Can I create a business model around this? The answer ended up being no, but I tried. And the idea was to basically, if you're an apartment building, you can start a campaign, fundraise, a few thousand, $10,000, $20,000 to create this rooftop garden greenhouse thing. Then the investment would turn into a CSA subscription, and so you get a harvest from that greenhouse or food producing operation, and it would kind of feed itself. And so you could go up to the roof and pick up your groceries or give them to other folks. in the community. Ended up not being able to make the business model work because the margins on vegetables and food are incredibly low, often subsidized by the government. So it made it really hard for me to build a scalable business, especially a venture scale business out of it. And that's when I realized I needed to kind of learn more about this whole business building thing. Became a number two at a couple of startups, one in Brooklyn, then another in Chicago. And I started this kind of second chapter of my entrepreneurial career in Chicago.
So was that really intentional because you were like, oh, because, like you said, because you realized you needed to learn more about that, so you actively pursued those roles in
Yes,
startup.
yes.
Right.
I think being a founder felt really natural to me, but I got humbled. I raised friends and family money, and it was like $10,000.
Oh, right. So you went quite far into it then.
I did. I
Yeah.
pitched a bunch of different investors. I must have had like 30 investor calls. We built a website. We built like some advertising materials and animated video that explained the concept. I had a really reputable development firm called Fueled in New York do these, more of a personal favor, do these wireframes of like this whole platform of how you can order groceries, and the vision was great, and I think anyone I shared it with was really excited about it, but the material, the function of the business was not there. So, and I was given that advice a number of times by a bunch of different people, but wasn't able to hear it until after spending a year or two on it. And it still holds a candle in my heart. I still think urban development needs to be changed. I want to align my personal values with what I do for work, but capitalism bit me in my early 20s, and I got thrown into the startup scene in Chicago, where I was able to get a broad view of adult startups, let's call them. People that were funded, people that had good business models, had traction, were growing. I was working in Lightbank, which is the VC arm for the Groupon founders, and saw firsthand how a successful entrepreneur with a business like Groupon could then take that capital, reinvest it as a VC, and then support all of the early stage companies within that city. So you back one or two successful entrepreneurs, you can change the entire ecosystem within a city. And they did. Like, Chicago is a different startup ecosystem because of Brad and Eric. And that was really inspiring to me. They went on to build Tempest and all these other companies that are now also billion-dollar valuations. And I realized that you don't just get rich; you can change ecosystems. You can change the cultural underpinning of an entire city if you do it right. And so that's I think my endeavor here now is figuring out how to win capital, but understand how to deploy it well so that it feeds back. Because I was given the education that I have, right? I went to college, I went to a great school, but really the education that I got was paid for by VCs. I got paid 50 to 100K for like 10 years, a lot of times underpaid, but learning a ton. And I'm so grateful for the VCs that were investing in those companies. And I almost feel indebted to them, right? They should probably get a little equity in the companies that I create in the future. That's a topic for another conversation. And I truly understand the value of how capital can go into it can go into a city, go into a community or a group, and then splinter out and really impact a lot of people's lives. And I think that equity and inclusion, like the equity and inclusion efforts that a lot of startups and cities are undertaking, should think about that. And it's like, if you're trying to hire equitably, hiring junior talent that is more representative of our population, I think is a really smart idea, because that's how everybody rises with those tides, just like I did. Except I had my privilege at my back in some regards.
Fair enough. Yeah, I mean, it's interesting what you say about feeling indebted in some ways to the VCs. Like I've had a similar journey. Like I did some entrepreneurial tinkering, I guess, when I was younger, but I didn't actually start a startup and go as far as you did. At that point, it was a lot more smaller scale. But then, yeah, like trial by fire, I feel like I kind of, over a 10, 15 year period, working my way up from sales into C-suite, got my education, my real education by doing it. Yeah. And then fortunately managing to advise a ton of founders after that too. But let's see if it pays off. It's still early days.
Well, you're paying it back too, well, right now you're mentoring and you're taking the lessons that you've learned and sharing them. And I think that's a really natural part of the startup, culture.
Absolutely. And I'm still learning. I mean, this is one of the main, very selfish reasons why I love doing this show. It's because I learn with every person I speak to, like yourself included. I find everyone fascinating, and there's always some nuggets of knowledge that I can take away from these conversations.
That's a great attitude to have.
A real entrepreneur is learning all the time.
Amen.
Yeah.
Amen, Greg.
Absolutely. But you also said something interesting there as well about that trajectory. So you did that for around 10 years, did you say, and working in various startups, and then also you mentioned something which was really interesting. You're saying about how these ecosystems can affect cities and communities and so on. But I mean, let's talk more broadly. They can also affect the world, right? Culture Absolutely. As a whole, and that's really exciting about what I think about it as a from top to bottom kind of thing.
Societally, I think tech startups have become the most efficient way to affect change in the world.
Yeah,
it's the most efficient capital allocation mechanism, and it's only getting more efficient because there was like 2 decades there where VCs were just throwing money at shit, and it was really ineffective. And I think that belt has tightened in the last 2 years, especially. And so with that change, with improvements in technology and the ability to set up a company, get a company off the ground faster with less resources and complication, makes it the most efficient way to impart change. And what I then became obsessed with after realizing was that, okay, so if startups are the most effective mechanism for affecting change in the world, how can you build a good startup? How can you build that tech in a responsible way? And I learned that it was through design thinking. It was through earnest listening and curiosity, the values that you're espousing now. And doing that well, because I think a lot of entrepreneurs understand the virtues of it, but don't actually practice it properly. So that's what I help with a lot of times, is making sure that you are doing the user interviews and that you're conducting those interviews properly, not with leading questions, that you've got good research methodologies at your back. And that affects the answers you get, which then affects your strategies and has a trickle effect into how you allocate that capital and strategy moving forward.
Yeah, I always tend to advise people to take the semi-scientific approach in that regard of looking to try and disprove your thesis, not to try and prove it.
Yes,
set out to try and find. Yeah, I mean, but I think it's an important way of doing it, because it's so easy to fall into the trap of asking leading or biased set of questions or make comments.
Yeah, there's a lot of, I would say the lion's share of founders are also salespeople.
Right. Or at least they should be.
They can sell a vision. They can sell an idea. And that's how they got the money to help start the company. But then when it comes to exploring and curiosity, they can't quite turn off the sales attitude and habit. And so they end up actually getting misinformed by their customers because of that. And that's, that I balance out those founders well.
I mean, it's the same mistake. If you go even earlier in the entrepreneurial journey for founders, it's the same mistake that people make with their friends and family. It's like, you're trying to sell it because you want them to give you approval and to agree. And so then they won't usually give you the answer you sometimes need to hear, which is, this is a crap idea.
Yes.
And that's really crucial, because that could have saved, that can save people years.
That's the biggest fear, I think. The one thing, ego is an important ingredient in the entrepreneurial mindset, but it is one that causes an anxiety about what if they're not going to like it? What if they don't accept this form of the idea? But if you go about your curiosity correctly, you might lose your original concept, but 3 or 10 more new ideas might appear if you're going about it the right way, which then, launch you into a different direction. That's how pivots happen. That's how profitability, that profitability curve or hurdle gets crossed.
Mm.
And so I don't think, in my experience, I've never died or killed a startup idea because I did research. I've always found a way to keep it going.
Hi, a friendly reminder to share this episode with your network, like, and subscribe. And if you are feeling really supportive, please consider reviewing the show on the podcast platform of your choice. It all really helps support what we do. Thank you. Now back to the show.
And sometimes there's not enough money, to keep going in that direction, or there might not be enough patience and resilience within the founder. But there's definitely opportunities. And because I'm a consultant, kind of like living between these companies now, I can take those, rested ideas and apply them to a new client or a new founder and be like, hey, this, and I'll always ask, but I'll be like, I was working on this project before and they put their idea to bed or went a different direction, but these insights are gold.
Yeah.
Like, can you apply these insights to your audience? Or
I've done that a few times.
You guys share it?
Yeah. And also connecting people together that are going after the same audience. I mean, like, to your point about community and stuff, this is something that feels like a massively missed opportunity for me. And I've talked about this at nauseum at this point, but like, there are so many startups going for the same target market. It's like, join forces, man. Like, combine your products, do a bundle offer. Like, there are ways of working together that everyone can win a bit better. And to be honest, there are so many of product offerings and things like that out there that by themselves don't really stand on their own 2 feet as well as they could if they were put together with maybe some other things. It's like, come on, guys, like, people want more value for money. Let's, work together here. Founders should be working with founders a lot more in a strategic partnership sense, I believe, especially in the early stages, to be able to
100% agree,
revenue
Greg.
opportunities.
Like, we were talking about how efficient the capital allocation method was in VC. This is a great opportunity for optimizing it further.
Yeah.
Like, when a bunch of founders are all failing at a single market, if you combine them, or if they were to get into a room and talk about the lessons that they've been learning, how would that affect things? And I think another, not hate to bring up ego yet again, but it's one of the reasons that keeps us from having that discussion. Like, I think 5-10 years ago, I heard a phrase that collaboration is the new competition. And I think that changed the way that I approached conversations with other founders in the same industry as me. I was way more open, and I kind of experimented with it. I was like, well, what happens if I speak to my competitor? What happens if, like, I talk to the product guy at the incumbent? And it only had good effects. Like, these problems that we're trying to solve are so complicated that if I peel off a layer and I hand it to you, I've still got 20 layers to go through here. It's not, but it might have made a big difference in terms of that efficiency or the way that we're both able to complete our job. So I look forward to that. I think, we're seeing already in the capital market that investments are shrinking, valuations are shrinking. People are interested in smaller, sooner returns or faster returns. So, like, this micro PE space is getting a lot of attention these days. Acquire.com, biz, buy, sell. Like, you can take a small business, turn it, sell it for $5 million more than you bought it for within 3 years. Like, a very effective way of generating wealth, and a little bit lower risk profile. And so I think that actually that attitude, we could translate it to the collaborative nature that you're describing. Like, how in a micro PE model, how do founders then get together, package themselves to be acquired? Because if you got 4 people that are all, one of them has good sales, but the other one has better technology and the other one has better branding, what if we were to combine all those things and have a little piece of something larger than a big piece of nothing?
Well, yeah, and I think it can happen in 2 ways. It can happen in the way that you're suggesting there, which is a lot more of an official kind of merger, capacity, or it could just happen on a far more superficial level of people just saying, hey, we've got these various products, they're all different from one another, there's not too much overlap, but they all apply to the same market. Why don't we just combine them and sell them as a package? Like, it could literally just be a commercial endeavor. It doesn't need to be, you don't need to go down necessarily that even complex route yet. You could even test the waters just by doing that first, and doing that, offering more value to customers. And that can be a good testing point.
I wish that was.
I've thought about this a long time ago, because, you see marketplaces within SaaS products all the time. If we're talking SaaS, for example, all the time, you look at Salesforce or HubSpot, they've got a huge suite of partners and integrations.
Absolutely.
It's like, why aren't startups doing that? Why aren't startups building a page dedicated to approved partners that apply to the same markets? Like, why aren't we doing that? I think that should be mandated, if anything, that if you're a startup, you need to have this page where you know what I mean? Like that feels like startups. Yeah, that's startups supporting startups. Like, why wouldn't you do that? Like, it's a great, I don't know. It's one of my pipe dreams.
From a technical perspective, it's difficult, right? Because APIs can be complicated, and
well, I'm not even talking APIs. I'm not even talking integrations. I'm just literally talking advertising. Like, literally, that's it. Keep it simple. But anyway, I digress. Right, yeah. Exactly. Yeah, but I digress. But yeah, it's one of my many stupid ideas, I guess, that I have. But maybe one day. But you're absolutely right. I mean, the competition side of things is incredibly important. I think it is. I've always been of the opinion that the competitors aren't your enemies. That we should be looking at ways to learn from each other and open dialogue with one another. But I guess I'm a bit of a hippie in that sense.
I feel the same sometimes. I feel the same. Like, I wonder, if we were to prioritize customer value instead of shareholder value, how would the whole thing change? I think it would tip pretty dramatically. And a lot of people who are making these decisions are the board members and investors, and the investors are really only caring about their return, instead of saying, hey, like, most of the founders that I meet want their product to live on more than they want to make money. They want the product to have some impact in the world that's significant and sizable. And if they could achieve that through an acquisition, no cash, or a merger with small equity upside or something, I think there's room for that. And I'm with you. I think that there's a marketplace for it. There's something that will lead to those types of collaborations.
I think there has to be. There has to be, because we are. I'm still very convinced we're in a bit of a SaaS bubble, and people. I was talking about this with my team earlier, that we're talking about sort of buyer fatigue and kind of the anxiety to do with subscriptions and all this kind of stuff. Like, it's very real, and it's getting increasingly more and more difficult to convince people to take part in a recurring revenue model. And something's got to give. And I think we're going to see that as a result, the rise of very new and interesting ways to get people to use their platforms. And we'll probably see a rise of open source and free stuff too, which we are in a way. But I actually attempted what you were talking about there a long time ago when I was working with one of the larger startups I work with. I attempted to get all of our competitors together to talk about a problem that we all experience. And it's to do with customer experience. So you'd probably like this story. It was to do with the onboarding of this particular tool. It was very cumbersome for all of us, for our users. And the bigger problem was that basically, if someone migrated from one to another, everyone had a different process, a different system and everything, and it made it very painful. And often we would lose out. Everyone would lose out in the ecosystem as a whole, because of the pain from moving from one solution to the other meant that people would stay, although they wouldn't be happy, et cetera, right? It fit loads of problems. So again, like, to your point, very focused on the user experience and the customer satisfaction. I attempted to get all the competitors together to talk about this. And interestingly enough, it was some of the more senior operators that prevented it from moving forward in some of the more, red tape-esque of these businesses there, the larger, more corporate sort of ones that were just like, we can't do this. And then the whole thing fell apart. But there were quite a number of them up to that point that were on board, because they understood that if we help them, okay, we're making it easier for you to get a competitor from us, but also we're making it easier for us to get a competitor from you. And at the end of the day, the customer wins. That's got to be the key. I think, what a great thing to be able to tell your customers. we all work together to make your life easier, you know?
Yeah, the messaging on that I think is altruistic and super appealing from a
Yeah.
customer standpoint. But I
was
understand the
obviously quite
anxiety
naive.
from the executive. Exactly, right? Like
Mm.
the I think we're at a vanguard in terms of a cultural shift. We're going to need to mess up. We're going to need to do it wrong a couple of times, and it's probably going to look like a bad decision for the first few attempts.
Mm.
But I do think that if we can find some way to do it where our incentives are aligned, I would be really excited about that change in the capitalism model, because really competition is the basis of the entire thing. And if you start chipping away at that, everybody's like, wait, what are we doing? What are we doing here? Is this even capitalism? So it's a big change, and so I think
Mm.
it'll happen slowly and cautiously. But I do believe we'll be better for it, and maybe it's just because we're two hippies here. But I think it'd be an exciting experiment at least.
Yeah, we'll see. I think things will force people's hands in the next few years. Like I say, I do see the
Yeah,
bubble bursting
yeah.
soon. But you said something really interesting earlier as well about venture as a whole and sort of the investment landscape being one of the, I can't remember your exact wordings, but one of the best sort of and most effective ways at contributing to culture, society, and so on. Um, do you believe that the actual structures in place for venture as an asset class live up to that, though?
No, because after venture comes publicly traded.
Right.
um, Usually. And so publicly traded, you're more at the whim of shareholder value and just maximizing shareholder value no matter what. And
Mm.
that's a dangerous thing. And I do think that maybe government has a role to play in applying ethics, and other societal metrics, environmental impact, societal impact, etc., to corporations. At a
It's a
certain
fine line,
point,
though, isn't it?
exactly, at a certain point, that starts to go against shareholders. So I think that there
Mm.
might be another category, like we have B corps. There's other things that are happening, in terms of like a meritocracy in the branding landscape. It's like I choose to spend my dollars here because they do more. I choose to not buy J&J products because they cause cancer and they're ignorant and corrupt. So we get to choose and vote a little bit with our dollar, but I think that the information is hard to trust. Um, Regulatory bodies in the United States have been largely corrupt. So the study that comes out with the thing that says that it's not harmful was actually paid by the company that it's a so
Mm.
I think we just need to brush that up a little bit, and we'll be heading in a good direction overall. But
Well, that,
VC is the birth of that stuff. It's where all the
yeah,
exciting new things are happening, and then when they cross the threshold, they become less innovative, more pure in their capitalistic tendencies, and that's where you need a CEO or an executive suite who prioritizes impact and
mm.
and benefit. And I haven't been seeing much of that. Um, but I think that, like we're saying, there's a changing of the guard. There's generational concerns. I think our generation is now filling more executive suite roles, and that will continue for the next 10 years. And there's going to be big changes that I hope we can maintain, that our parents kind of lost as they grew older.
Mm. Yeah, we will see. It's going to be an interesting year. Um,
Yeah.
this comes out in 2025, by the way. So anyone listening or watching, we recorded this at the end of 2024. So that's why we may be talking about things slightly out of context for, I don't know, who knows what's going to happen in the next couple of months. It's going to be interesting. Alien invasion by the looks of it, I think, but we'll see. Um, let's go back to your story though, really quickly, if you don't mind. So you spent that time, like you said, really skilling up and grafting in the and learning in the startup landscape. So then what was the next step from there?
I got hired at a like mobile app and game studio by a friend of mine. We
Oh, that's
worked
cool.
together for a few months, and then they asked me to be a co-founder in the next company that we were building together. And The team, the three of us, it represented like a sales and marketing genius, a technical genius, and I was the product guy and the design guy. And we ended up going through 3 or 4 pivots over a couple of years, every 9 to 12 months, starting basically a new business model. And I got really good at defining the tool set that you need to do that pivot. So like, how many customers do I need to talk to? How much time and money do I really need to spend on rebranding? What kind of website builder should I use? Because our tech team is dedicated to the actual product. I need to be able to make this website. So I got really good at website design and building. How can I test this model before we invest money in it? To de-risk some of these product decisions. Can we fundraise with this concept? Is this something that's interesting and appealing to investors? And so I did that a few different times. We hit, gold or an oil well or whatever. We hit the mark in our last pivot. And that company is doing really well now. It was named the number 2 fastest growing software company in North America last year by Deloitte. And I realized as it started to scale that I liked the 0 to 1 moment. Like, I had actually developed a pretty unique skill set in that. And it wasn't really coming up with good ideas that was difficult. It was choosing which good idea I should pursue or which we should reinvest in. And that's just as someone who wants to be a serial entrepreneur and have a number of successes over my life, that felt like the best place for me to become a student, is how do I pivot? How do I find product market fit? And so that's what I've been doing for the last 8 years or so. I started an agency with 2 other founders who have a design mindset, and we kind of, as a group, became obsessed with this product market fit methodology and pivoting methodology. And so we came up with these different tools and blended different, philosophies and approaches from books, Google Design Sprints, Jobs to Be Done from Tony Ulwick, the Hooked model from Nir Eyal, like all these different methods. We took what was best, left the rest, and started to test these with founders. We ended up working with over 100 companies and venture studios and family offices to allocate capital in different ways and test new ideas. And then I got the founder bug again and sold my equity in that agency to my co-founder, and have been exploring new projects myself for the last 2 years or so, after I moved here to Mexico City.
Cool. Well, I want to hear about those projects if you can share some stuff about them. But going back to what you're saying about the agency, is that you formulating this kind of this structure and this approach to work with these 100 or so companies. What are some pearls of wisdom that maybe you can share about sort of trying to find product market fit, about the art of pivoting, etc.?
Once you lose touch with your customers, you've lost touch with your business. So having a rhythm set up, we call it like an engine that doesn't require much fuel, going in the background of your business is really essential. So if it's just you as the founder, that's a heavy burden to bear, but it's an important weight to carry. If you've got a team of 20, it's lighter on the executive suite, but then you have to have, a UX researcher or a designer or a developer kind of working in the background to do proper research and delegate. And usually that should be allocated to the product manager. But product managers are often inundated with like Jira tickets and politics and communicating with up and down and all of this stuff. So they oftentimes don't have time to do the research, but it's so important you can't skip it. And that's where I come in, is I just help a lot of founders and early stage teams make sure that they're not skipping a really crucial step. And I would say product market fit is something that you do. It's not something that you find. It's constantly being done. And that's the general pearl of wisdom. The second thing I've learned is that there's no formula. There's a toolkit, and there's different ways of using those tools at different times based on what's in front of you. but anyone that sells you a process hasn't gone through it enough to be disproven.
I'm glad you said that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because that's generally when I start calling out BS. It's like, no, there's no off-the-shelf solution.
There's no, and we tried to sell that, and we tried to create that, and then we looked at each other, and we were like, I don't think this is the way it goes. I don't think there's reality is just breaking this constantly, and we just need to recognize that. So what is the alternative? The alternative is you have 10 methods that you can use at different times. There's no specific order. And you just need to be judicious about how you're balancing data and ego in this whole process. Because if you're just doing data, there's not enough people making a decision on gut and saying, let's just go this way. We have to move. Even if this is the wrong path, let's go forward. And the alternative is really corrosive and toxic as well. If you just have someone shouting directions to go in every week or every month, I'm sure you've met those people. Yep. There's no data to validate your believability. You are our credibility is really deterred or decreased. I actually think there's an irony in balancing ego and data. Your ego and your intuition as a leader is only as good as the number of times it's proven itself, right? Your track record is the piece of data that defines how believable your ego and intuition is. So even intuition rests on some data point, right? If I'm a new young employee and the founder is saying to go in these different directions, I'll be like, okay, you're the guy or you're the gal, I'll follow you, until 10 months later, when everything they said was going to happen didn't happen, and now you're like, why the fuck am I following this person? I need to find a different job. This is a terrible company. Now I'm socializing how unbelievable this asshole is to the rest of the company. None of us want to follow him or her. And you fucked up as a founder because you just led with ego and intuition, and you're special and you have the vision. But really, you need to complement that with some sense of data to improve your credibility and transparency. And it's even good for posterity. So you can look back 5 years from now and understand why you made the decisions you did that got you here. So there's so many reasons why I think good research is important. It's just too often founders, don't stick around to try to really recognize and realize the value of those methods.
Yeah, and I can think of a number of people I've worked with or worked for that fall into those categories for sure.
It's all too common. It's all too common.
Yeah, and it's interesting as well because I do fractional work too, and so I do fractional CCO work, and obviously what that's predicated on is trying to find some semblance of product market fit more often than not. And what is I often find myself repeating again and again and again is much of what you said. That there's a certain level of instincts. We also need to go out and find data, but at some point you just need to go and do it. And so that's often on me to sort of make that recommendation and that semi prediction. And to your point, you are scrutinized with that kind of, well, you're only as good as what you deliver. So, it's tough because you're like, well, look, we're going to try it, but it might not work. And then we need to pivot, and we've got plan B and plan C. But there are a lot of founders that you work with that just aren't prepared or don't fully understand that. Even if you tell them that early on, right up front, this won't work necessarily. We don't know for sure. This is all a shot in the dark. And you still get those frustrations of why hasn't it worked? It's like, we told you, man.
I can't work with those founders anymore. Really,
no,
I'm just exhausted by that conversation.
Yeah.
And it's you'll learn on your own. I'm not going to be your teacher. Let's talk again in 2 to 5 years.
Yeah.
I love working with founders who are earnestly curious, are willing to be proven wrong, are looking to iterate and change.
It's exactly why I stopped doing sales coaching, because originally that's what I was focused on in the earlier part of my consultative career. Was primarily in sales coaching, and it's that through and through. I mean, it's just that all the way. Because as a sales consultant and coach, it's just 2 months in, why haven't we closed any deals, or why haven't I closed any deals, and so on. It's dude, like, because you have more problems than sales, like, like, but
There's a
that's
number of
not
things that could cause
right.
that. Yeah, yeah, exactly.
Exactly. It's like, okay, we can only do so much. You've hired me to talk about sales. We're talking about sales. We're nailing that bit. But if your product sucks, I can't help you. So don't shoot the messenger, man. But I hard pivoted away from that as soon as I could. But yeah, it's important. I think often about the sort of duality that you need as a founder. It's quite hard because you need to have almost contradictory set of skills and character traits, like you say, to have a high enough ego to believe enough in your own ideas and conviction for them, and to believe that your solution is the best solution, and all of that sort of stuff, the vision, everything.
But enough humility
to know when you're.
And that's why it's such a beautiful thing to find a founder like that. And that's the backing of my intuition, or of my investment philosophy as well. It's like, I want a really bullish founder who will just run through a wall to learn what's on the other side. Not to run through the wall and then tell everybody who's on the other side how great it is. And like sell the other side of the wall, and then you walk through the wall too, and you're like, what the fuck is this? Is not.
You need someone who's prepared to come back and say, I fucked up.
If you are enjoying this episode and want to support the show, please like, subscribe with notifications turned on, and let us know your thoughts and opinions in the comments below. This lets YouTube know we are doing something right. Back to the show.
I fucked up, or
that was the wrong
it's
one.
A little different than we thought. Here's where we need to. Yeah, exactly.
I've now spent some time, got some data, and now I have a pretty good feeling it's that one.
Do you guys agree? That's what I would love to hear founders say more.
Exactly.
It's like, this is what I'm seeing. Do you guys see that too? Should I go back and look for more data? What do you guys think? That's what I think good leadership is like presenting a set of facts, and asking for feedback if other people are corroborating it and seeing you're drawing the same conclusion from those facts. And hopefully you're hiring and partnering with really smart people that can give you good answers to those questions. I think a lot of founders and CEOs will just put too much weight on their shoulders, that they're supposed to have all the answers. They're held accountable to everything. And in reality, a company is just another community. And if you're leading the community right, you're making it as I don't want to say democratic, because that can go wrong in some ways, but as collaborative as you can.
Yeah, I agree 100%. And in fact, today is a great example of that for me. We've got the Christmas break coming up and so on. Like I said, this podcast being released later, but and I've been kind of, with my startup, been burdening myself with a lot of ideas for the new year, for us fully launching our initial offering, going to fundraising. And I'm like, there's so many commercial ideas and marketing strategies and so on that we need to implement. And I got all these ideas and all this stuff. And I've been talking about it with my team members. I was like, this isn't an efficient way to do things. I know I'm going to be focusing on fundraising in the new year. I need to be focusing on that. And I can't go out and execute all of these other things while also doing all the other stuff I do to put my, food on the table. So it's like, right, I need to speak to the team. I need to ask their opinion. I trust their opinion. They're extremely experienced and very skilled. So today was a collaborative commercial strategy session. It was like, right, guys, I want to hear everyone else's ideas. I'm going to share mine. I want you to tell me if they're good, if they're crap, whatever. Let's put them on a board. Let's just rip it all apart. Let's see what we can do. And by the end of it, we ended up with a nice little, not huge, but a nice little, first couple of months strategy for 2025. And that's going to evolve into. So yes, yeah.
Don't look beyond a few months. I don't think it's possible.
Right. Well, no, because also, it's so early stage for us that we might need to we might need to pivot. You need to stay agile. If you burden yourself with too much ahead of time,
you likely will.
Yeah, and we already have multiple times. So
yeah, exactly. It's not a might; it's a likely.
Yeah, absolutely. So, yeah, I fully agree with you on that one. So can you reveal much about the projects that you're working on now? What's going on in your brain? What are you working on and tinkering with?
Yeah. So I've been in the software world so long, sitting behind this computer, talking to people virtually. I got a little tired of it. And I also got a little tired of the venture software world. How people are allocating capital, what egotistical founders are doing with that capital. Oh, man, it's disturbing. At its worst point, it's disturbing.
What do you mean? What do you mean it's just by that specifically?
Like why are you spending $100,000 a month on marketing when your retention rate is 10% or
Right.
anything less than 20 or 30%? You're just burning money. So why are you doing that? And there could be good answers, right? Like we need the optics. We need to get a couple of maybe marquee brands. Like I need to get this brand and their name so I can show that and share it with the world. And then that'll lead to more stuff. Like there's rationales behind some of it. But at the worst side, it's just someone that's like growth. I need to get to the next funding round, not to profitability, and so it's like
playing the game.
It can be right a game that's being played, and sometimes that game is profitable and that works out for folks, and sometimes it is the opposite of profitable and it smells a little like theft and like ignorance, So I try to always direct the energies of the team towards something that feels sturdy and believable. Because ultimately you have to defend your decision to your team and to your investors. And so if in a year from now I failed and the strategy I rolled out didn't work and I burned $500,000, I can go to the people who gave me that money and say, hey, this is what I did. This is why I did it. Honestly, would you have done something different? Like with the information I collected from these interviews, these surveys, this competitive analysis, I put those things together and I came up with this strategy. What would you have done differently? But if you come to them and you say, I burned $500,000 because I felt good about this direction and it didn't work out, you really you're just pinned as an asshole and short-sighted, and you're not going to get money from those folks again, probably. So anyway, I got kind of disillusioned by this game, by this racket, and started to think a little bit about consumer packaged goods. And so last year, I started a jewelry brand that failed miserably, but fairly quickly. Luckily, I only spent maybe 4 months on it before putting it to rest. Maybe spent 5 to 10 grand. And I was like, okay, jewelry is too hard. It requires a ton of advertising dollars, and the ad ecosystem has just shit the bed in terms of efficiency. The world of Bonobos and Casper and Warby Parker, of all these like big e-commerce brands that just crushed it and had really low customer acquisition costs and fairly low margins. That just doesn't exist anymore. The ad platforms have all recognized that margin and have closed it. And so it's really costly to get an e-commerce brand off the ground from the start. And I don't have that startup capital. So I was like, okay, what can I do? A little bit lower cost, still a physical product, and I landed on water. I'm currently working on a canned water company here in Mexico that gives a significant portion of its profits back to innovation projects that encourage water security. Mexico is facing some water security issues, as is a large portion of the world right now. And basically, I'm kind of incubating this product that's taking the Liquid Death playbook of like counterculture, branding, loud voice, but nothing really more. It's not like our water is more pure or infused with natural oil. It's just water. But it has an attitude and it has a purpose. And so we're going out now and testing the acceptance of that. We just got 5,000 cans delivered to us last week. It's been an interesting ride. The cans wouldn't fit in the storage unit that we bought, so we had to upgrade our storage unit and take down 400 cans by hand so it would fit into the door. And then we started to manually seal the cans with a seamer I got in China, but that seamer didn't fit with the can ends of the lids that I got, so we needed to reorder another 5,000 lids that are coming next week. And so now we'll be able to get out into the market, finally seal the cans, get into the market, do some market testing, and figure out if the name, the story, the product itself really resonates with the communities here in Mexico City. We're specifically starting in Mexico City, and yeah, I'll keep you posted on it. The company's called
That's
Pinche
exciting.
Agua,
Pinche agua.
and it's Pinche Agua, which for the non-Spanish speakers means fucking water or goddamn water. It's an expletive water,
Mhm.
and
And is
for a
that
fairly
going to be
conservative
breaking
country.
any rules
Yeah,
there in terms
I
of
think it will.
marketing
I think
and advertising?
but maybe in a good way. I think we'll find our people because of the name. We might need to change the name. That's fine too, right? I'm staying open to all the adjustments that are ahead. But the thing I like about this is I spent, let's say, like $4,000 on this project so far, and if I sell half of my cans at $1 a profit, I'll have made back more than half of that. So I'll maybe have spent $2,000 and split with my partner only $1,000. So that's low risk capital. I'm making a big potential ripple in the way capital is spent and allocated, and consumption patterns exist here, right? A lot of the water is being controlled by Nestle, Pepsi, Coca-Cola, large multinational conglomerates that don't have the interests of the local community in mind and are very extractive. And I'm coming in with a sober mind, knowing that I'm an American building a Mexican water company, potentially falling victim to the same issues that all of these companies have. So, building the company in a way that helps insulate from that, has a transition plan to put it into the hands of Mexicans in the next 5 years, and hopefully build a branding kind of like machine that takes a badass approach and can go to Flint, Michigan, and can go to India, and can go to these different places around the world that have water security issues, and use consumption patterns to put money back into the communities that are affected by this particular issue.
That's very cool. I mean, I had my first can of water the other day at an event. I know it sounds like a weird thing to say, but I've not drank out of a can
That's
for
quite common.
water
Yeah.
before.
Yeah. Was it Liquid Death?
I can't remember what it was. I think it was. It wasn't. Well, maybe it was. I can't remember. It was at the Google Startup Hub in London, and they had the cans in the fridge. So maybe it was them. But it was a very odd experience. It didn't
How
feel.
so?
It just didn't feel right to be drinking water
it felt
out of
more
a
like
can.
beer, or what was it? What was the experience like?
There's a kind of a sensory connection that I'm making with holding a can.
Especially a tall can. Right, it's not.
Yeah, well,
this was
a soda can size. This one.
It was a soda can size.
Yeah,
okay.
So that was even weirder because because I've usually seen them in quite large cans, and I thought maybe that would work because I don't normally drink out of those anyway. Like Monster Energy drink, I don't drink that. But this was soda can size. So and there was some weird sort of brain disconnect with what was going on, and I'm drinking that, and I'm expecting something else.
You're thinking there's going to be sweet. Right.
Or beer soda, or something. Yeah. But instead I get flat water, and I'm like, this is weird. And then I'm convincing myself I can taste the metal, and I'm like, but I can't. I know I can't.
That's an issue.
For some reason,
that's an issue. We have to deal with
really?
that. I have to soak my lids in baking soda for a few minutes and then scrub them to get the aluminum residue off. I'm just learning so much about this industry. It's fascinating. Okay. So that is, you might not have been imagining that. That is a concern with canned water.
I was thinking I was maybe just convincing myself. Yeah, it was just confusing. Overall, I don't think I found it too pleasant. I would have preferred. I think I would have preferred just to have got a glass and poured the water into the glass and just drank.
Or a bottle. How do you feel about the bottle format?
I don't mind bottle. I mean, I prefer metal. These things, which is weird because I drink out of this, and this is metal. So I don't understand, but I don't know. It's just there's something about the whole thing that just threw me. It was a bit bizarre.
I get it. No, I get it, and I want to try to capitalize on that. I think a lot of what we're trying to do as a water company is counterintuitive. So having a counterintuitive consumption moment might not be bad for us. And I'm wondering, how do I capitalize on that? How do I make, we were coming up with fake reviews for the product yesterday that we might post as jokes. And one was, I meant to buy beer. I'm still looking for beer.
Right.
Or some, it's like still need a beer. Anyone?
Maybe just put on it like 0% ABV, like just
right.
for a
And,
laugh.
well, so we had some icons like you can't like on alcohol. It's like a pregnant woman and a line through it, and it's like 18 plus and a line through. So we were gonna put icons on ours that was like pregnant woman. It's good.
Go for
like
it.
or 18 and below.
Just big green ticks, like
So there's I think there's some playfulness ahead of us because of all of these cultural associations with alcohol, with the can format, with how water companies have been operating for the last 10 years.
Naturally
because also
flavored.
Water, if you think about it, water has only been kind of commoditized since I think it was like George Bush who became a big investor in like a bunch of wells and water companies. So it was like maybe 5 years before him. It's like in the early 2000s. So it's only been really privatized in this way outside of like maybe a couple of early movers like Poland Spring for like 20 years. So it's a new industry and it's wildly extractive. So I think even if I were to succeed in building a $100,000 business, that I would have a business narrative to show others, you can do this. You can. We can find a way to support our families, but also be responsible with this natural resource that we will die without. Like this is not a thing to just like throw at capitalism and be like, have your way, capitalism. Like there's certain things in human life on Earth that we can't fuck with. And we're playing with fire in a lot of ways. So I think one of my goals with this business is to try to demonstrate that you can build a business and take care of a natural resource in a responsible way. And I might disprove myself. It might turn out that like I actually can't run a business and take care of water, and maybe we need to be a nonprofit, and maybe we need one of the things I've been saying. We wrote down some interesting copy last week. We're a sheep in wolf's clothing. We use for-profit tactics to drive non-profit ethics. And I think that's the type of business model that resonates with our generation, and is the type of business that I'd be really proud to be behind. So I'll keep you posted on this.
Very much in line with the sort of conscious capitalist sort of movement, right? I suppose.
Yeah, exactly.
There was a bottled water company that I saw years ago. I'm not sure what they're doing now, if they're still around or not. But their whole business model was actually free bottled water. And
the advertisements.
Yeah, and I thought that was quite clever. I have no idea if they're still around or if it went anywhere.
Because I should reach out to them.
I've not seen it anywhere. Since, but I remember just seeing.
I only saw it online. Actually, I never actually encountered the product.
Saw them giving away free bottles of water and selling it for advertising. But I suppose, I don't know. I remember looking at that and thinking, cool concept, but in practice, how many people are going to sit and read the fucking ad on the bottle of water?
The ad, is it confusing to have that on the label? Like, so you're advertising for candy on a water bottle. Is the water, is there candy in the water? Right. Are you advertising for a real estate company?
And there were a couple of videos I saw where people were just genuinely confused and they were like,
I think there's
the catch? Why are you giving me, you know what I mean? So I don't know.
Yeah. What's the catch? Exactly.
Yeah, like genuinely confused. There was one guy who was actually, I think, an entrepreneur himself that got given one of these bottles of water, and he was just like grilling the guy who gave it to him, like from a business model perspective. And this
That's
guy
hilarious.
Was like, I don't know. He's like, and he was just like, well, if it works, fine, but I don't think it'll fucking work, and just walked away. It's like shit. That's a good viral moment.
I like that feedback. Promotion. Yeah, exactly. That's the kind of feedback that keeps us going as entrepreneurs.
Exactly. Well, look, we've somehow managed to get through part 1 already. That was incredibly quick. I told you it goes quick. So that's the end of part 1 for those listening and watching at home. We're going to be back in a couple of days with part 2. If you're watching this on YouTube, Spotify, wherever, check back, subscribe, all that nonsense, so you get alerted when part 2 comes out. We're going to dive a little bit more into what you're doing now, and then also talk a bit more about what's to come. I've got questions about this water, this kind of water still, so we'll come back with a bit of.
All right, sounds good.
Okay. All right, cool. End of part 1. See you in a couple of days, everyone.
Thank you for listening and/or watching. Subscribe with notifications turned on to get notified when part 2 comes out. While you wait, please join in the conversation in the comments below.